Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senior Vice President, Database Development, Andy Mendelson.
Hello, good evening everybody. I'm glad you could get here before the festivities of the evening and hear about what's going on with database development. What we decided to do this year is a little different. Last year we talked about 11G and all the exciting new capabilities in the product. And this year, the theme of the conference is your open world, right? So we actually put up an email ID, askandy_us@oracle.com, and we had invited people to ask questions about what sort of things they'd like to know from database development. And that's how we structured the talk today. We're just going to answer about 6 questions that came in. And of course, we got to choose which 6 questions we wanted to answer, but we think they're questions you'll all find interesting. Okay, so let's kick things off. The top questions we're going to answer today. What's new and exciting in 11G? How do I get to 11G if I want to get there? Is there a good, easy upgrade path? What have we been doing since we talked about 11G last year? There is not a new database release to announce today, but we've got lots of things going on. We have some other interesting things up our sleeve we'll talk to you about there. Another question was forums applications. So those of you who've been at using Oracle products for years know that for the first 20 years of our existence or so, Oracle Forums was the way you build applications for Oracle Database. And there's thousands of those applications out there still running. And a lot of customers are interested, I guess, in how to move it to a more modern web-oriented world. What is MAA? That's one of my favorite questions. I'll talk about that. And what else is new? So we'll save a little teaser at the end there. Okay. So here's my list. It's usually a top 10 list. We took about 8 things here. What I'll do now is I'll just go through pretty quickly and go through some of these things, just to remind you about what we talked about last year when we talked about 11G and what were the cool innovations there. And so what I think, I tried to pick out things that are features that really compel people to move to the new release. What is it that they don't have with 10G, they have a real pain point, and they need some help from Oracle to solve that pain point. And that's what these features were all about. So first of all is performance. And when you talk about performance, this is one of those things that's the easiest feature to adopt. You just install the new release, you run your application, and it goes faster. What more can you ask for, right? It's really easy. You don't have to change your application to take advantage of it or do anything to take advantage of a new feature, etc. So performance is one of those interesting things that if a customer is a pain point, and it's a performance area, and you fix it in the next release, they really want to move there. And so I've been working with some customers who are very excited about some of these features. The stream performance, for example, is something a big telco wants to move all their systems from 9 to 11, just to take advantage of the stream's performance improvements there. Some of these are very compelling. The fact we can compute statistics 10 times faster, that's something every Oracle DBA needs and wants to deal with the statistics management problem. Okay, and one thing that I'm happy to report that overall, we have a number of metrics that we call performance atomics that we measure before we ship every release. And our goal, of course, is to make every one of those better, which is, it's virtually impossible to do that. But for 11G, we got 85% of our metrics are better than 10G. So I think we're going to see a lot of good performance experiences as customers move to 11G. Okay, next. One of the big performance features in 11G, of course, is secure files. This is our new re-implementation of Oracle Blob data types. And this feature, and I can tell you, is one of the most compelling features in the release for people who do a lot of manipulation of blobs. Last year we had the NIF people up here. These are the Fusion research people in Lawrence Livermore Labs. They've gone to production just to get their hands on secure files. This is an incredibly hot feature to be able to manage files in the database as fast as in a file system is pretty incredible. Nobody really believed we could do it, so we're very proud of this feature. Inside Oracle, our enterprise content management products family has uptaken this capability, and they support it now, and they're seeing huge performance improvements. You saw the Beehive demos this morning. Beehive runs on 11G using this feature natively. It's one of the reasons it's got really great performance. And I think any of you that have document management, document-intensive applications are going to see real good benefits here. Also in 11G, we added a data type called DICOM, which is a medical imaging X-ray format. We have a bunch of customers who want to get to 11G just to use DICOM on top of secure files. So this has been a really compelling feature for release. Partitioning is number 2 on my list. In 11G, partitioning has been around since 8.0. We've had it for a long time. It's probably the most popular product option we've ever had for the database. And in 11G, we had a major new infusion of technology into the partitioning option that I think is going to be very compelling for people that have to manage large databases and really need to use partitioning to do that. We added a partitioning advisor to make it possible to look at your query workload and advise you on what the best way of partitioning your large tables is. We added some automation as well. So we have automatic interval partitioning, automatic reference partitioning. That just makes it easier to do partitioning now with the release. So it lowers your labor cost. And then our composite partitioning functionality, which is all around smart table scanning. With composite partitioning, the optimizer can use multi-dimensions. In this case, we've got the order numbers and the order date ranges. And the optimizer can look at that and figure out which of the partitions to scan when it's doing a table scan, and avoid scanning the multi-terabytes of data, and just scan the few gigabytes of data that you need to answer the query. So that's very important, just filling out that capability in 11G. Okay. Partition. Number 3, compression. So this one is going to be incredibly popular with customers as they move to 11G. One of the things that we did in 10G and 9i is we had some compression capability as you loaded data into the database, which was useful for mostly a data warehousing style application workload where every month or every week you load a bunch of data, you can compress it, or in a workload where you every so often move data from maybe one table or table space to another, you can do compression there. But it wasn't really applicable to the masses of customers that are doing typical transaction processing applications. With 11G, we've widened our compression algorithm applicability to basically all workloads. And this is something I don't think people really get yet. What do I mean by all workloads? Well, I mean like e-business suite, PeopleSoft, SAP, those kind of workloads. Your mainstream OLTP workloads, we believe that you can pretty much turn on compression on almost all of your large tables in any kind of workload, a data warehouse or OLTP system, etc. The reason is we're using a very low-cost algorithm that is implemented in a very clever fashion so that we only do the compression in a very lazy fashion, so the overhead is very low. And at query time, the performance is actually better. It actually improves performance at query time because we're using basically a deduplication algorithm, not a classical compression algorithm that's actually CPU intensive. So it's a very interesting feature that I think is going to be widely adopted. How can you not like a feature that reduces your storage costs and gives you better performance? It's a great combination. So with that, I'd like to bring Mark Townsend up here. Mark is VP of Product Management for the database. Come on up, Mark. And we're going to do some demos today, and Mark's going to do some of them. And we're going to start out with compression. So what do you have for Mark?
Okay, so if you could switch to demo 1, please. So as you can see here, I'm using SQL Developer, and we have 2 tables that we've loaded into the database. We have a locations table, and you can see it's about 5.5 million rows in this table. And we have standard compression capabilities, or the standard way that we've loaded that. So the 5.5 million rows are using about 200,000 blocks of database storage. I then also have the same table with the same data in it, but this time we've loaded it into a table that's using the advanced compression option. So we have the same number of rows, 5.5 million rows, but you'll see that we're using 54,000 blocks. So we're getting about a 4-to-1 compression ratio, which is pretty much what we see in the real world life. Now, as well as the storage savings that we get, we of course also will accrue some performance benefits from this as well too. So what I'm going to do now is basically run a SQL statement that first queries the location table one way and then queries it the other. However, I just closed the window that's done that. So give me a minute, and I'm going to do this from a terminal window rather than try and get this back. So like any good demo, this one is completely live. So instead of using SQL Developer, I'm going to use SQL+, log on to AR, and I have a demo called a query called logs already set up that is going to query the table. Now while this is running, I also wanted to show you something else that's new on the Oracle database, which is a graphical explain plan monitor. Many people want to actually look at the way that the explain plan is executing in real time. So in the latest release of the Oracle database, we have a SQL graphical explain plan monitoring capability. This is available for grid control and also for future releases of database control. And here you can see that query that I'm running actually executing. So I'm going to drill down into it and have a look and see what it's doing. The advantage of the graphical query explain monitor is it allows me to visually see what's going on. So I'm not just looking at an explain plan per se, but I can see the amount of progress that's been made in real time. I can see that this is doing a table access form. I can see the I/O count that's going behind it, and you'll see that as this is executing, it's actually incrementing and updating these values for me. So when you get to talk about manageability, this will be one of the features that will help improve that manageability capability. So looking at the execution plan, we can see that it completed its full table scan against the data in the uncompressed table. It read all 200,000 blocks to get that query, and the query itself took about 55 seconds or just under a minute to execute. So now we're going to go back to our window, and we're going to execute that same query now, but now we're going to do it against the compressed data. So once again, we come back to our graphical explain monitor. As it updates, it's going to actually pick up that new query. We can see it executing there. Once again, I'm going to drill into it, look at what's happening. You'll see it's already 55% completed. It's doing the full table access scan that it was doing previously in the hash group, but now at about 45,000 blocks of I/O, it actually completes. So having read the 54,000 blocks of I/O, it actually completes the full query. And if we go back and compare the performance from the two, you'll see that the compressed query took approximately half the time. So not only are we getting a 4-to-1 compression ratio on the storage, but we're getting anywhere from a 2 to 4 time query performance improvement as well.
That's really exciting, Mark.
Thank you.
Okay. Before we get off compression, I just wanted to show you one other interesting data point on it. We of course run Oracle on the e-business suite. And one of the things we did with our compression is we tested it out on the e-business suite real production data we have in Oracle to take a look at what kind of compression ratio and performance we get with it. So the interesting thing is, number one, we're getting actually over 4 times compression on the sample of the 10 largest tables that we have in Oracle under e-business suite management. We're getting table scan performance, just like Mark showed there, about 2.5 times faster, just because we reduced the amount of I/O needed there. And then what's the overhead? You know, the real issue is, well, what's it going to cost me? And so the cost is on the insert, update, delete operations. And for e-business suite, in the example we tried, we're getting about 3% overhead. We've measured overheads up to about 5 to 10%, so in worst case. But that's not a really bad worst case. It's a really great trade-off. The query times can go faster, and yeah, your updates go slower, but not a whole lot slower. And most applications are 80%, 80 or 85% read-only. So we think this is a really great, exciting new feature in the release. Okay, the next innovative feature in the release that I think is going to be compelling for a lot of customers is what we're calling cube organized materialized views. So what's this feature all about? Well, how many of you out there use some BI tool? It's BI EE from Oracle, Cognos, Business Objects. And you want to make your queries, your multidimensional style queries, which we show sort of here on this PowerPoint picture, run faster. And you don't want to change anything in your database, you just want to make it go faster. And so with the traditional methodology in the database, you can use materialized views, and you can create a whole sequence of materialized views to try to anticipate what are the summary queries your customers are going to run and make those run faster. Well, the cool thing about these OOW cubes, the cube-organized materialized views, is that they're equivalent to hundreds or sometimes even thousands of these SQL-style materialized views. And you can just create an OOW cube for the appropriate star schema and for the dimensions, etc., and make those queries run really fast. And the other really cool part about it is it's all done in the database. As you update your underlying tables, we update automatically the materialized view for you, the summaries for you. There's no mess, no fuss. It's a very nice, simple process. Easy way to get extra performance out of your BI tools. So that's 11G cube-organized materialized views. Nice performance feature. Another one of the really outstanding new features in 11G is Active Data Guard. And a lot of customers use Data Guard. It's a very popular technology for dealing with disaster recovery, dealing with other sorts of failures, storage failures, etc. It creates a duplicate copy of your database, either at a local site or at a remote site. And the one issue people have with Data Guard is that you can't do a lot of that standby server you set up. It's got the database, it's running the redo, it's applying the changes, keeping the standby in sync with the primary, but you can't do a lot of useful work there. So Active Data Guard is really trying to change that equation. So as I said earlier, a lot of workloads, a lot of applications are read-only. What if you could move those read-only applications off your primary database onto your standby? And in this case, with Active Data Guard, you can use the Oracle Physical Standby capability, which is our fastest way of running Data Guard. And you can use that to create a standby, and then you can have that standby open for both reading, doing reporting style applications, and for applying the changes from the primary. So it gives customers, number one, that's two benefits. It lets you offload workloads from your primary database, move them off to the back of the standby side, so you improve the performance of your primary, you reduce the hardware requirements on your primary, and then you make better use of all those servers you've got on your standby database, and run real applications over there as well. You can also offload things like backups from your primary to your standby as well. So that's Active Data Guard. Real exciting new feature in 11G. Very compelling. Also, one of the features I think a lot of the customers are moving to 11G just to get that feature. Okay. Another area we've been working on for a while now is manageability. Make the database much more self-tuning, self-managing. So we can really reduce the load on the DBAs. The DBAs can then, of course, manage more databases or work on more skillful activities than what we automate. In 10G, we did a lot of work there. This shows you some of the metrics we gathered from what we saw as you move from 9i to 10G. And then in 11, it was hard to beat what we did with 10G, but we did a lot of work again to automate some of the activities that we didn't quite finish in 10G. Things like automatic memory management have now been completely automated in 11G. SQL tuning is now fully automated. You can turn on SQL tuning, and we will just gather all the queries, and over the course of the day, look for the ones that are the high-load queries and automatically tune them for you if you so desire. So 11G manageability, another reason for moving to the release is, again, reduce the labor costs you've got around managing your Oracle database. And then one of the features that I think is one of the most exciting and innovative things we did in 11G is something we call real application testing. And so what is this all about? Well, all of you have this problem that every so often, you want to change the infrastructure underneath your database. You might want to move to a new version of the operating system. Or you might want to move in different storage arrays. Or you might want to move from single node Oracle to rack Oracle. And you want to make sure that after you make that move, it still runs reliably and it runs with good performance. And real application testing lets you automate the process of testing that your infrastructure change is going to work out well It's got two main features. The one we talk about here in this slide is what we call workload capture and replay. So this lets you automate the process of creating a regression test for your production database. So you can go to your, let's say you want to move to a new version of the operating system. You can go to your production database, capture the workload from your live production system, move it over to a testing environment where you're running the new version of the operating system. Okay. Then you can replay that workload you captured just the way it ran originally in your production environment and validate that the new version of the OS is going to run your database reliably. And you can imagine using this for any kind, all sorts of changes of various sorts. And it really automates this whole process of creating a regression test that used to take, months and months of development to do right if you did it all. So this is a really cool part of 11G. We spent a lot of time, looking at ways we could make it easier for customers to make changes around the database. And real application testing, I think, is a real breakthrough there. There's another part of real application testing called SQL Performance Analyzer, or SPA, that I'll talk about a little later, that also, I think, is very interesting for customers. Okay, let's move there. Move next. Okay, so those are sort of my top 8 lists for innovations in the release. 11G, of course, has over 450 new features in it, so there's lots of other stuff, and I'm sure all of you have cool features that you think should be on those lists and aren't, but that was our best attempt at getting the top 8 or so. So what we're going to do now is we're going to run a little video of some of the customers that are using 11G and what they're thinking about the release. So let's run the video now.
11G Active Data Guard, we're really excited with the new possibilities that are in front of us. We can utilize our disaster recovery site not only with reports and queries, but with automated read-write mode for testing purposes.
3M is moving to Oracle Database 11G for some of the performance improvements as well as better manageability and on-demand scalability that Oracle Database 11G provides us.
11G's maximum availability features that Dell IT is most interested in are around the areas of online patching and things that allow us to maintain our environments without causing service interruption to our internal customers.
The most important feature in Oracle Database 11G for us is performance with respect to the XML-DB technology. And we are seeing that. Our early benchmarks are showing a tremendous speed improvement by a factor of 10x over our initial testing in Oracle 10.2.
Okay, so the customers are the ultimate proof, and I certainly invite you to go to presentations this week from customers who are going to tell you about their experience with the release. I'm also happy to report that last week we actually have put out the patch set for 11G R1 patch set 1. It's now available on Linux, and we'll have it out on the top Unix platforms over the next couple, Unix and Windows platforms over the next couple of weeks. And pretty much all the Tier 1 platforms will be out by the end of October. So you should all keep an eye out on OTN for release of 11G R1 patch set 1 on, not on OTN, on MetaLink for your platforms. Okay, so that's the first question. What's new and innovative in 11G? And let's go on to question number 2 from our customers. What are the upgrade paths to get to 11G? And so the interesting point is we think today about 75% of customers are running 10GR2, about 20% are on 9i, the 9.2 release. And so that's about 95% of the customers can upgrade directly to 11G in one step. The customers that are on the older releases have to go through either 9i or 10G in a second step. But it's quite easy to get to 11G. And so what are the challenges? So why can't we just go in and upgrade our hundreds of databases? What are customers worried about there? So there are 2 major issues customers have. Number 1, I've got some application, it works great today on 9i. Is it going to work reliably when I move to 11G? Is my application going to break? Is there some incompatibility between the releases that's going to cause a problem? The other issue is, once it runs reliably, what about performance? I need to have the same performance or better performance, as I move to the new release. What about that? And so how do you confirm and validate that both of these attributes are true? Okay. So number one, on the application side, we're getting really good reports from customers who've moved some 9i applications to 11. Not seeing any need to rewrite the code at all, which is, of course, number one prerequisite. And what I'm going to do now is look at sort of how you test this, answer this problem. How do you validate that your database, as you upgrade it to 11, is going to run reliably and with great performance? Well, there are two things we have in 11 for doing that, and I'm going to talk about two paths. One of the new things we have in 11G is for dealing with optimizer query plans. So one of the reasons performance might degrade when you go to 11 is because there's a new version of the optimizer, and we do a lot of work to make sure the optimizer creates even better plans every release. And 99.99% of the plans are better. But you're running some application, it's a complex application, it could be PeopleSoft or SAP, it's got hundreds of thousands of SQL statements. And there could be a couple, 5 times 10 statements, let's say, that maybe don't run faster. And, that's the problem. How do you find those 5 statements, And in development, we do our best to try to, of course, make sure this doesn't happen. We have a regression test filled with hundreds of thousands of SQL statements from e-business suite and other applications to try to do that. But in the event you're concerned about this, and there might, there's reason for concern, how do you deal with it? Okay, so what do we have in 11G? Let's go through the upgrade in place scenario. Okay, so you've got a 10G database. So let's say you want to go from 10 to 11. What do you do? So what we can do is you first shut down the database before doing the upgrade. Okay? And then we have something new in 11G called SQL Plan Management. And what SQL Plan Management lets you do is it lets you say, okay, let's shut down the database and spend a day over a weekend to get this thing up and running reliably with good performance, etc. So first thing you do is you set the optimizer features enabled mode to the previous release you run. In this case, let's assume it was 10.204. And then you turn on SQL Plan Management and you say, I want to capture the query plans that I'm going to see as I run my production workload in this environment. Okay? So now you're using the optimizer with a 10.2 flavor of the optimizer, and we've done a lot of work to try to make sure that as you go to 11, we do a really good job of emulating the 10.2 version of the optimizer in 11. Okay. Next step, what do you do? Okay, so you can run a production workload in this mode and capture the query plans that the 10.2 optimizer is generating for you. Okay, and you put them in what we call a SQL Plan baseline. Okay. So you're running along, we're capturing these plans, everything is running pretty much the way it did using the 10G optimizer query plans. Okay. Next. Okay, so we've run for, let's say, a week or a day, whatever you think is enough to capture what you think are the vast majority of the query plans that matter, right? And then we say, okay, let's shut down, let's restart, and now let's run with the real 11G optimizer features enabled. Okay? And let's turn off the capture of the SQL statements. Okay? So now what we've done is the optimizer query plans from 10G are locked in, and as you run 11G, one new thing happens. As part of SQL Plan Management, whenever the optimizer decides that it's found a query plan that's actually better than the one that's been frozen in from 10G, it'll put it in this repository that we call the query SQL Plan Management Baseline Repository. And it will mark it as a query that needs to be validated. And then at your sort of will, we will go and run that query against, compare the query, the execution time for this new query plan against the one that is being used in production today for 10G, let's say. And if it's running faster, you then have the option of saying, okay, let's move that plan in, I like it. And you can do that sort of plan at a time, or you can just tell us whenever we find plans that run faster, to just automatically move to them. So what you've done now is you have the best of both worlds. You can, very quickly move to a new release and use the old plans that are known to work well, but you can also now accept the plans that run faster because the optimizer is going to enhance to find better plans in 11G. So you can get sort of how your cake and eat it too. You upgrade real fast, and then you move in the higher performance plans as they're found. Okay, so this is called SQL Plan Management. It's a new part of 11G. Okay. Now, another way of doing things, which can also be combined with the first way, is a more systematic way of going about moving to 11G. It's a little higher cost, but this is something you'll want to do, especially if you have very critical applications and you want to spend a lot more time looking at things. So the next slide we'll talk about one of our customers, Metro Group, who actually has gone through this process of trying to moving from a 9.2 set of database. They have hundreds of 9.2 databases. They want to move to 11. And they've been using SPA and real application testing in this process. And let me tell you some of the kinds of things they're doing with it. So a lot of customers over the years have been running these 9.2 databases. They've set up all their init.org parameters. And after a while, sometimes you don't even remember why they were set. There could be all these, underscore init.org parameters set. And so the first thing they want to do is just, use SPA. And the first thing they do with SPA is SPA can collect all the SQL statements from the previous release. So you collect all your 9.2 SQL statements, and it actually can use SQL trace to collect them for you from 9.2. You move them into your test environment, right? And then you can start running those SQL statements using the new version of the optimizer that comes with 11G in this case. And you can compare the performance you're getting from the 9.2 environment. It brings over the real statistics from the 9.2 environment, right? Okay, and you can start comparing things. And the first thing you can do is just run it straight ahead and not change any init.org parameters or anything like that, see what you get. And then you can do other things. You can say, okay, well, I don't know why these init.org parameters were set anymore. Why don't I just get rid of them and see what happens? And when Metro did that, they actually found things were running a lot faster. The other thing you can do is, and you can fiddle around with some other parameters that you want to keep, but maybe the values don't make any sense anymore, and you want to go fiddle with those. And so SPA will let you do this over and over again. You can change the parameters. You can then rerun the query set that you brought over from your 9i database again, look at the change in performance, and basically over a period of time, just optimize the heck out of your database and get the performance to the best level possible. Okay, so that's the cool thing about SPA. You can just keep juggling, making changes to your configurations, making various other sorts of changes, seeing what the effect is, and then iterate again. It's very, very easy to use. So this is the other recommended way of sort of upgrading is create your test environment, use SPA to collect your SQL statements from your 9i or 10G environment, tune the heck out of those queries, and then go production with 11G. Once you go to 11G, of course, you can run with SQL Plan Management and use that other capabilities I mentioned earlier as well. One cool thing about SPA, which is worth mentioning at this point, is that SPA, although it was a new feature as part of real application testing in 11G, we've actually backported this capability to 9i and 10G in the sense that we can capture SQL statements from all these old releases from 9i and 10G and bring them to a test environment and use SPA. The other thing we can do is, if you're in 10G R2, let's say, and you want to just compare the performance of your SQL statements as you go from like 10.203 to 10.204, you can use SPA there as well. You don't have to have upgraded to 11G to use it. So that's SPAs, and those are the two main ways of upgrading to 11G. And as I mentioned earlier, Metro Group is one of the customers we work with very closely on looking at the ease of upgrading. And we think they verified, number one, that their applications run very reliably. They didn't have to rewrite a line of code. Number two, they were able to use real application testing, the SPA capability, and the workload capture and replay, and really do a good job of testing ahead of time before they went production, and really gain confidence that everything's going to work reliably before production is moved. Okay? And the last thing I just want to say about upgrade is we've been spending a lot of time compiling all the best practices we get as we work with customers and do upgrades. We did this with 10G, and now we're doing the same with 11G. There's a document called the Upgrade Companion on MetaLink that you should definitely go take a look at before you do any upgrades, whether it's to 10 or 11. And there we're compiling all the best practices. It's a living document. It's not a manual. Every month we update it with whatever we learned from our customers over the last month or so. Okay. Now for the rest of the presentation, I'm going to start talking about some new stuff that we haven't talked about before. And it's stuff that we've been working on in development since 11G R1 ship. First of all, I already mentioned the first patch set is now in shipping on our base Linux platforms and will be coming out on Windows and Unix platforms over the next couple weeks. So I know a lot of customers have been waiting anxiously for that patch set, and encourage all those customers to check it out. The other thing we've been doing is working with all the ISVs and getting them to certify their products on 11G. We've got hundreds of ISV applications now certified, tools applications, etc. All the Oracle, of course, key applications, e-Business Suite, Siebel, PeopleSoft are certified. The latest news is e-Business Suite version 12 just got certified as well, so that's certified with 11G now. Previously, e-Business Suite 11.5.10 had been certified. The other thing we've been doing is certifying all the product options. A lot of customers are interested in Database Vault. We're getting that certified with all of our applications as well. In-memory database cache is something new that we introduced over the last 6 months. So what is this all about? So all of you know about x10. It's our in-memory database technology. It's a standalone persistent database. But we also have packaged it in a way that it can be used as an in-memory cache to improve the performance of your back-end Oracle database. And we're now selling that as an option to the 10G and 11G databases. And we encourage you all to take a look at that. That was something we announced over the last 6 months or so. I mentioned earlier, real application testing has been backported to 9i and 10G. So you can now use it as you move from both 9i and 10G to 11. Or you can use it using the SPA capability, even as you move between patch sets on a 10G release. That was something we did over the last, actually first half of last year, of this year. And Secure Backup, we came out with a new version of the Secure Backup release. This is version 2 of this is our backup to tape utility, and I'll have a little more to say about Secure Backup a little later, some exciting work we're doing around cloud computing, which is the next bullet there. I'm going to talk a little bit, and we're going to do some demos of our work with cloud computing. Cloud computing is a real popular buzzword out there now. Some people think it's just another word for grid computing, but whatever. It's still something that we're seeing a lot of interest in from customers, and we've done some interesting work there that we want to talk about. We'll do some demos for you there. Optimized warehouses we talked about last year, and we've been continuing to work with our hardware partners and storage vendors of various sorts, and we're rolling out new versions of these optimized reference configurations and data warehouses for the data warehouse market to give customers great out-of-the-box experience when they want to build an Oracle data warehouse from it using the hardware from any of the various vendors. We now have lots of configurations way up into the 100 terabyte range. So these are not toys, these are real useful configurations. I was talking to some guys from our EMEA organization. They said in virtually every situation now where a customer wants to implement a data warehouse, the customers are looking at our reference configurations and using them as their starting points for choosing the appropriate storage and servers to build their data warehouse. So that's something you should definitely take a look at. SQL Developer. So the last two items on the list are for our developers. We have a lot of developers out there, DBA developers or Java developers, etc., who want to use our tools, SQL Developer and Application Express, for building their applications. We come out with new releases of this technology very rapidly, sort of decoupled from the Oracle database releases. SQL Developer 1.5 came out this year. We have a really cool new capability in that called interactive reporting. I hope all of you have seen that already, but if not, you can certainly go down to the show floor and take a look at that. We're also now in beta with a new capability called SQL Developer Data Modeling. So we're going to add to SQL Developer the capability of doing data modeling, entity relationship modeling, graphically, under screen, and we have a lot of customers who are very interested in that capability. I think we're going to be demoing that, right? Yeah. And then the last thing is Application Express. Again, we come out with new versions of AppX very rapidly, independent of the database releases, and I got it back. The new interactive reporting capability, of course, is part of Application Express, not SQL Developer. SQL Developer, the new key capability was our migration from Sybase to Oracle capability. And then we're going to demo a very exciting new capability for those of you who are using forms to make it easy to convert a forms application into an Application Express application. And with that, let's move on to the next question, which is the one I just mentioned. So how can you convert a forms application into sort of a more modern infrastructure like Application Express? And I'd like to invite Mark Townsend back up here. And Mark's going to show you how to do it.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So obviously, you know, if you've been working with Oracle for a long time, you've had the database, and in the past you've probably developed forms applications against the database. Now you may also now be developing in Java and .NET as well too, and over time you've ended up with quite an install base of these forms applications. So you can be rewriting these in Java and .NET, etc., or you can be supporting them as they go on. But for some reasons, you may actually want to migrate these over to Application Express. Perhaps you actually want to take advantage of some of the cool capabilities that Application Express provides for that environment, such as the web-based access and also the interactive reporting. So the latest release of Application Express is actually going to allow you to support that conversion away from your forms applications. So there's a link on Application Express called Application Migration, and I'm going to click on that and hopefully get another screen. Alright, so I'm going to create a conversion project. We're going to convert some forms. Now, I can convert Oracle Forms, but previously the Application Express developers also provided me with the ability to actually convert Microsoft Access applications too as well. So we're going to demo the forms, but if you also have an install base of Access applications, you can use this same capability to upgrade them onto an Oracle platform. But in this case, we're using the forms. It's going to be in my schema, and I'm going to pick up a forms file. So in the latest version of Forms, it will produce an XML file. That's what I'm going to pick up and read. So I'm going to read the orders XML file. And at this stage, Application Express is actually interrogating that file and understanding what it is that that form is doing. Now, you have more than one form. We don't just have the orders form. So I'm going to also add my customer forms file as well too. Once again, Application Express is actually interrogating that form file and is understanding what it is that the form application is doing. And then having finished that, I'm going to be in a position where I'm ready to generate the application in Application Express. So you can see here are the two forms that I've loaded, my customers forms and my orders forms. And Application Express has reverse engineered these. It has the blocks and the items and the triggers, etc. And generally, we get a pretty good conversion across these things. In some cases, we can't get 100% conversion, but you can come in here and edit them and clean them up, etc. So having done that, I'm now going to create the application. This is the standard Application Express user interface that goes through and does this. It's created the master detail. We're going to choose what I think is a reasonably pretty template to do that with. And having chosen that, actually create the application now. So what it's done at this stage is analyzed the forms applications, converted those over to Application Express, and now I can log on and run the forms or the equivalent forms that I was running in Application Express itself. So for example, I can come in and look at different orders. I get the standard sort of capabilities that I do with Application Express. I can drill down into order item details, and just as I can with my master detail forms, I can actually step through the actual application version of this capability. Now while I've got you here, one of the reasons that you may do this is because you want to use maybe some of the interactive reporting capabilities that Application Express provides. So this is the customers form that's been converted over to Application Express, but as part of that conversion, it automatically inherits the interactive reporting capabilities. So for example, I can come in and set a highlight. Maybe I'm interested in good customers, and good customers are ones that have a credit rating of excellent. So I want to apply that, and it would be useful if I actually chose a color to put against it. So we'll make those guys green. And now interactively in my form, it's actually doing that highlighting for me. I can come in and do other things. Maybe instead of highlighting the credit rating, I actually want to come in and create a control break report against those. So it's put all of my excellent customers together, and then I have a control break that goes down to good, etc. as well. So simply by taking your existing forms applications, converting them over to Application Express, you breathe new life into those applications, plus you inherit all of the goodness of Oracle Application Express. Now, as part of that conversion, however, you probably also have lost some information about the tables that they're being accessing. So you have tables that the forms have been accessing, etc. And you, of course, can use SQL Developer to come in and draw around these tables and look at the different things. But I'm a reasonably sort of visual guy, so it's interesting for me to read text, but sometimes I like to have a diagram of what's going on in my database. So to that end, as Andy mentioned, we are now available to beta Oracle SQL Development Manager data modeling capability. So now in SQL Developer, I've opened the data modeling window, and I can come in and just do simple things like drag my table over to this modeling window, and I get to see it in a graphical format with the relationships between it, etc. Now obviously, if you have a lot of tables and objects in your schema, you're not necessarily going to want to drag all of them in there. So you can also generate files, and in this example here, we have generated a DDL file for all of the objects that we have in this application. So I'm going to open this DDL file. It comes from Oracle Database 11G, but notice that we can also take DDL files from DB2, SQL Server, UDB as well too. Come in, and now this is then going to create a diagrammatical version of all of the tables that are in the database myself. And you can do the standard things that you would expect to do with these things. You can move them around, you can create them. If you're interested in the order table, you can drill down into it and look at it, right-click on it, and look at the properties for the table as well too. So lots of goodness and richness in that. Now this is converted back to my relational model. If I want to, I can also go one step further up and then convert that relational model into an actual logical entity relationship model, and this allows me to do the design recovery from the physical database that I've got. So lots of good reasons for Oracle database developers and also forms developers to be very happy. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Yeah, not only does it convert your forms application to Mark showed, it actually makes it a better application, a much more modern application. Very, very exciting, I think, for customers using forms. Okay, so our last two questions. What is MAA? Next question. Let's do this one real fast. So MAA is something that I feel really passionately about. I see customers struggling with availability, and invariably we go in there and they just don't understand the best practices of how to get really the highest availability out of your Oracle database. So over the last probably 5 years or so, maybe even more, we've been compiling all the best practices into a document that's on OTN. It's called Maximum Availability Architecture. And what we did here is on one slide, we summarized the entire thing for you. Definitely go out to OTN and see all the details. But what do you want to do? First, you got a single server. You want to make it more highly available, right? And how do you do that? So first thing we've got is ASM, Automatic Storage Management, which can do software mirroring for your data. Next, you want to make sure your data is safe and is backed up. So if you use your data in your primary database, you've got a backup. So we've got first flash recovery area for doing backup to disk, and then we've got secure backup for taking that backup from disk and off to tape periodically. And next we've got our data recovery advisor. So if you ever have a media failure of some sort, with 11G we added an advisor that helps you walk you through the various alternatives for recovering your data, and gives you confidence that that step you take is really going to get that data back for you as fast as possible. Big advance in 11G. Of course, we have real application clusters for dealing with server failure, which is the core of our MAA. And then the other cool new feature we've had actually since 10G is flashback database, way of getting your data back in time the way it was, either at the database level or at the table or table space level. You know, bring it back in time to where it was 5 minutes ago in 5 minutes, as opposed to, you know, hours and hours if you use the old-fashioned, you know, go to a backup and roll forward. Total recall, another cool new feature we have in 11G that lets you again, look at data as it was at a point in time in the past. You can turn total recall on a table moving forward, and from then forever, from then henceforth, you can run queries against that table and look at it as it was at a point in time in the past, using our flashback query mechanism. And then, of course, DataGuard, another big pillar of our MAA architecture. I talked about that earlier with our active DataGuard capability. It lets you create a redundant copy of your database. Okay. And finally, online upgrades. You know, so as you move to a new release, we have capabilities to do that online. And then there's more and more other stuff that I haven't mentioned here, things like schema changes and adding CPUs to your server, assigning dynamic reconfig, etc. All kinds of cool stuff. So those of you who are already adept at MAA should definitely be taking a look at it and take a look at our document at OTN. The next cool thing we've done is we've extended MAA to the cloud. And this is, I think, one of the hot areas out there. Everybody's excited about cloud computing. And so what we've done with 11G is we've said, okay, and earlier releases, what if you, instead of backing up to a tape device, you could back up your Oracle databases to the cloud? And we worked with our first cloud computing partner here, Amazon.com, and we're integrating with their S3 storage cloud so that you can use your standard database backup utilities, RMAN utilities, do your backup. And we're going to give you a demo here, and I'd like to ask Tim Sheen to come up and do the demo.
Thank you. What I'm going to show you at this point is basically a very simple demo to show you how to install and configure backups to the cloud for your database, as well as show you how to monitor and report the backups that you have on the cloud. So this is using the Amazon S3 storage that we have a partner with. So what I have here is just a terminal to my database machine, and I'm just going to run a very simple installation script. Do a couple of things. Okay, so we supply this install tool with our OTN credentials, so just a simple OTN user, okay, as well as an Amazon S3 credentials as well. So we verify those credentials and we create a registration ID for that backup to cloud service for this database. We're also verifying that the Amazon S3 bucket, that's the location where we're going to store backups, is available. And we'll also generate an initialization file as well as an Oracle wallet to help you to store those credentials. Okay? So what I'm doing now is verifying the S3 bucket as well as creating those files. Secondly, we're going to be downloading a cloud backup library, which will actually allow you to connect to the cloud with your database. And so that library is being downloaded right now. Once you have downloaded the files in your library, it's very simple just to configure your cloud backup now. So this is our Enterprise Manager database control, and we can go into backup settings and go ahead and log in once again for our timeout. So with Enterprise Manager, we give you an ability to set up both a disk and tape settings. So many of you are familiar with how to back up the disk and the tape. Well, with Oracle Cloud Backup, it's essentially the same thing. There's no difference in the way you set your backup up. So as you can see, with tape settings, to our database backup, Oracle Cloud Backup looks like basically a tape interface. So we can allocate as many channels as we want for our tape, as well as we can allocate as many, for example, compression or non-compressed backups. Okay? Right here, you can see that we have the library pointed to right here, as well as our configuration file as well specified. So with these two parameters, we're ready to go to start our backup. So at this point, we can just schedule our backup as normal. Now, for those of you who don't use EM, you can use RMAN, which is our database backup recovery tool. So, in fact, EM will generate an RMAN script, and will execute that script. So, those who use RMAN, very similarly, can use cloud backup as well. So, we'll just kick off a backup, just as we do normally, and we'll also select the appropriate options. So here, we can see that we have a full backup while the database is online. We're backing up all the archive logs. And if you're making a backup over to the cloud, which is over the internet, we recommend setting up encryption. That will basically secure your data in transit as it goes to the cloud. So we've specified our algorithm, and we'll also authenticate those backups with a password. Okay? So we see here, we enter a password. At this point, we can select our destination as I showed you before as tape. This is our settings that we just set up before. Okay? We'll start the backup immediately. We see our RMAN script, very short script here that we run. We have 8 concurrent strings that will be used for this backup, and we have an encryption secured by a password for in-transit data. Okay? So we'll just submit that job, and you can actually view, just as normal, the backup progressing. So this step right here for backup is essentially going to show you that output as RMAN is actually processing that script. As you see here, we're starting to allocate channels, and also you'll see that we're going to start the backup process as well. You can see how we've started a compressed backup set, and after the compression happens, we'll do the encryption. Okay? Last thing I want to show you is just how to monitor and report off of these cloud backups. This is our cloud backup portal, which can be accessed from OTM. So all these facilities are very easily accessible. It's built on Apex. They are very nice design tool. So you can see here that we're showing how much of the cloud storage we're currently using over the last month. So we have about 35 gigs worth of storage being used in the cloud, as well as our average backup throughput over the course of time as well. As you see, we've done backups over the number of several days. So Oracle Cloud Backup is very simple to use. Essentially gives you a very nice way to offsite your backups versus going to tape or using some kind of offsite vaulting solution. And it gives you immediate access to those backups right over the internet.
Okay, thanks, Tim. I was talking to one of our biggest customers yesterday about this, and I thought when we first were talking about backing up to the cloud, it was more for sort of small companies, developers, kind of thing to play around. But this company, which is one of the biggest in the world, came up and said, no, we're already looking at doing this. We have another cloud vendor we want you to work with, other than the one we've got in Amazon. And I was sort of amazed, but I think this could turn out to be a lot bigger than any of us think as far as backing up databases, archiving databases, etc. So I think this is going to be very popular. What's mentioned here, see, we already talked about this a little bit. EC2, Amazon, well, S3 we talked about. Amazon has another cloud, which is their server cloud. And the server cloud is also an interesting place for developers and others to work. So what we've done is we partnered with Amazon to create what's called an AMI, basically an image of the Oracle database and Enterprise Linux as well, and make that available on the Amazon website. And so if you want to, you can say, I want to rent an EC2 server, I want to run this Oracle Linux image on my server, and Amazon will automatically provision that for you. So that's another way you can leverage a cloud. In this case, Amazon's EC2 cloud for running your database server applications. The other cool thing we've done is we've integrated running the server on EC2 with the backup on S3. So if you're running a database on EC2, you can also back it up to the S3 cloud, all within the confines of Amazon. This is available for all additions to the database. It actually works. Yeah, I think we have it back to 10G. I'm not sure. Do we have 9G or just 10G? Just 10G. Okay. The last thing I want to mention in the cloud space is that for a number of years, for developers, we've had our own little Oracle cloud up there for doing application development using Apex on the web. We have about 14,000 users at apex.oracle.com. We welcome all of you to go try it out. It's a great way to try out Apex, build some applications. It's all free, and a good way of kicking around new versions of Apex, new versions of the database as well. And so to summarize what we talked about today is we talked a lot about, answered a lot of customers' questions, 6 questions in all. Hopefully we got the message across that we think 11G is quite an exciting release, ready to go. And we think it's easier to move to 11G than any other release in the past. We've done a lot of work there in the areas of things like real application testing, database replay, SPA, and SQL performance management to make it easier than ever to move to a new release of the database. We also talked about some other cool and exciting stuff like the forms conversion to Apex, cloud computing, etc. And we welcome you to go to our website and get more information. And before you go, I just wanted to do one little teaser. What else is coming from development? Well, Wednesday, Larry's got a keynote, and we sort of held back one little thing that we're working on that we think you'll all be very excited to hear about. It gets, we're calling it X for extreme performance, and Larry will tell you all about it on Wednesday at the keynote. And I strongly encourage all of you to go check it out. And with that, I'd like to thank you for coming, and have a good evening.